Welcome to Selling the Storm on ENF Trade TV, the show where we break down challenging solar installation scenarios and highlight how industry leaders overcome them. I am your host Twambak, and today we are thrilled to be joined by Huon, Director of Smart Commercial Solar from Australia. Hi Huon, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. My name is Huon Hoogesteger. Managing Director and founder of Smart Commercial Solar. We are Australia's second largest commercial industrial provider in Australia for solar and battery.
Don't have the time to watch it all? Use the chapter markers below to jump straight ahead or speed us up to match your pace. We have heard a lot of stories here on Selling the Storm, projects that push the limits. So Huon, for Smart Commercial Solar, what was that particular project and what made it such a massive challenge?
Yeah, so we call this project Agright Meriki, which is the name of the customer, Agright, and they're a chicken farming company for meat, for poultry. And Meriki is the name of the farm that we built this solar system on. And this project is a 4 megawatt solar tracking system feeding a centralized power station, which is 4.4 megawatt hours of lithium storage with 2 megawatt of diesel generator backup, feeding out through a HV main in about 3 kilometers to feed 40 sheds of chickens, water pumping, water filtration, and 6 homes across a very large piece of land. And it's 100% off grid and actually will be soon connected to the grid. Since installing it originally, we added another 1.2 megawatt hours of storage. So we're actually up to 5.6 megawatt hours, and it is the largest off-grid farm, I believe, in the world.
Well, that's quite a spec. You have done plenty of commercial installs. So what made this particular project stand out?
It was a funny origination to this project. I've been working in chicken farms for a decade, and I was actually sitting down at lunch and a bottle of wine with my customer, as all good meetings should happen. And we started scribbling on the back of a napkin to answer the question, do you think we could run a chicken farm off-grid? And I said, yeah, 100%. You know, I actually live off-grid myself, and that's how I actually got started in this industry. In 2004, my brother and I bought an off-grid property and put solar and battery in, and I still live there today off-grid. And I've designed hundreds and hundreds of off-grid systems to meet all sorts of different needs. And then the next question we had to solve was, would it make financial sense to take a chicken farm of this scale, one of the largest chicken farms of its kind, off-grid? Yeah, so it's like red flag to a bull. I said, 100%, we can make this work. I didn't know actually that we could, but we did.
On a farm where a few minutes of outage can kill 2 million chicken, how did that no-fail pressure shape the design of the entire setup?
Yeah, I mean, reliability is the key to success here. And having reliable products helps that. Having backup. So we have a centralized diesel generator at the solar and battery system. And then actually on the individual farm areas themselves, we have another 4 generators as the third now point of failure. And then we actually have another set of generators just in case everything else turns bad. So there is 3 layers of reliability built into this system, because if the chickens go without a cooling system and water for more than 5 minutes, we lose 2 million chickens in 5 minutes.
So you have basically built a private 11 kV mini grid around a large Sungrow central inverter. During commissioning, what was the most worrying behavior you saw? And how did you tune the system so that you can trust it off-grid 24/7?
No one had done a project like this at this scale before. And so, you know, we know principles and we know how things should work. The main area that we had to pay attention to was the EMS, the Energy Management System, which is effectively the brain of the operation. There was a lot of tweaking. Now, we also built this project in record time. We built it in under 6 months. There were hiccups along the way. And I could say that even after commissioning and placing the chickens in there on the first day, we probably remained watching that system and making adjustments to the EMS and the way that the system behaved. We probably kept doing that for another 6 to 8 months after the original installation. That was poorly understood, I guess, by myself and my team. We thought that the system would be pretty much plug and play. There's nothing plug and play about that system. There was a lot of customization, a lot of tweaking, and some very important lessons were learned.
That's understandable, and more so in a real-time situation.
It was very close to real time. One of the interesting things that I think I learned along the way here was that manufacturers of particularly battery technology at that time were not really aware of what they were producing. And like all things solar and battery today, it always just takes a little bit of time to find out the gremlins or the trouble in the machine. And so one example was looking at the equalizing regime between these two 2.2 megawatt hour batteries, which are really just two container frames filled with smaller batteries. And we could see over time that the chemical mismatch of the individual cells in the individual packs and between those two big boxes were presenting some interesting characteristics, where one battery was discharging faster than the other one, but charging slower. And so working with Sungrow, thankfully they continued to work with us on it. But it did take us about 9 months to create a firmware package that would end up self-equalizing those batteries and stop having so many little gremlins attacking the reliability of power. So it was hard work, and there's some stressful moments there.
Yeah, that's a great insight actually. So if our research is correct, you oversize the solar array well beyond the farm's daily load, even if it means curtailing energy on sunny days. Why did that bigger by design approach make more sense than a smaller, cheaper system?
Oversizing the array for off-grid systems, I think is just broadly good practice. Solar is fairly cheap, batteries are fairly expensive, and so what we wanted is an array that would always perform, even in terrible weather. So even if it's a fairly overcast day, we're still getting our batteries back to 100% every day. So that meant that we could have a slightly smaller battery pack. Now, we actually designed that solar, we designed this whole system based on interval data. So we took another chicken farm's interval data, which is 5-minute increments of their energy usage, and we stacked a data set of sunlight against that load profile. Now, we got something wrong in that, as you do when you're dealing with data. Now, it was a tragic story, a funny story, I guess. But the reality is, we're making our best estimate based on real data, except the problem with the real data is, of course, the type of motor technology and the lighting system that the farmer actually installed in their sheds was a completely different spec to the original farm that we used the data from. And so the load profile and the behavior of this particular chicken farm, largely different, large enough to make a difference to our system design. And regretfully, I probably should have installed an extra megawatt hour of storage and taken a 1 megawatt of solar off. But, that's another lesson learned.
Now, going a little bit away from the technicals, let's talk about the construction operations and logistics. So according to you, what was the most challenging part of building this off-grid system? And how did you manage to overcome it?
Yeah, there was quite a lot of challenges. As I said, we're building in fairly fast time. Major issues was supply chain and logistics issues. We received pretty much 90% of the tracker, except for the 10% that actually mattered at the time. So all the tracking equipment arrives, but no posts. And as you know, the first thing to install on a tracker is the post in the ground. Yeah, so that caused us some stress. It actually caused us to lose our timing by about a month. The other consideration that we had to make was that we were installing in the hottest time of year in Australia, in the outback, basically in a desert. It was a hot, dry and dusty December. We were meant to be finishing at the end of January. We didn't finish till the end of February, which is definitely the hottest time of year over here. I think the heat, though, actually affected some of our workers. And And we had a really unfortunate incident on that project where a young guy was told not to do something. He went and did it anyway, and he wasn't thinking very well, and it caused a combiner board to catch on fire and caused a big issue with a fire on the site. And that was actually it was a mistake made by a human. You've got to be careful when you're sending guys out into the middle of the desert to do work, because it affects their performance and affects their ability to think. That's what happens on those jobs.
I'm curious, given the farm's remote location, the exposure to heat, dust and severe weather, were these environmental factors taken into account when selecting equipment or materials for the system?
The selection of equipment was mainly based on performance, on yield. We talked about the bifacial panel. That was probably partly due to the bifacial and the format and price. In terms of the battery, though, we went for that particular battery because it's liquid cooled. In a very dry, dusty, hot environment, you probably don't want to have pure air cooled batteries. Also because the load profile of that particular client is very high. We decided that, water cooling was definitely the better idea. The EMS, we ended up putting an air-conditioned room around the EMS because we found that was getting pretty hot, because even though it's just a computer, it seemed to be getting pretty warm. So now we have a nice air-conditioned room as our control center if we ever have to go out there.
At least you have a good room to sit.
Yeah, exactly, and keep the beer cold.
Huon, let's now talk about leadership and impact. During this project, which key decisions do you believe played the biggest role in setting smart commercial solar apart from other companies?
The key to getting this project done well was not just a naive approach to a can-do attitude. It's we understand principles really well. We understand what should happen, and we're very keen to say, yes, we will work it out. We have a very hands-on leadership approach, and we would have a very practical discussion about how to get things done. It was always a strong team effort and collaboration. And I think that's something my company has always done well. It's actually not about making profit. Whilst money is important, but it is not as important as having a good outcome for our customer. Because especially in that industry, like so many of our customers, that is a small industry in a small part of the world. And if you don't have your customers' needs as the primary focus, you don't end up with a customer. So our customers will talk to each other, and very quickly your reputation can be lost if you're paying attention to the wrong thing.
A good amount of passion is involved into it. Quite understandable. So how has this particular project influenced your approach to other challenging installations in the future?
Every problem overcome is a small deposit into the bucket of confidence. And I try and teach my kids this, it's okay to fail as long as whenever you fail, you go and fix it. And yes, on this project, there were many areas where things didn't go right, but we always fixed it. And ultimately, we've ended up with an incredibly beautiful, stable power supply that the customer's happy with. And it gives us a lot of confidence to do it better next time for our next client. We're one of the few people in the world with this level of experience. We can now apply that knowledge right around the world in basically any environment. But it starts with small things, and I probably wouldn't have said yes to doing that project if I hadn't done the same thing a thousand other times on smaller ones. So hopefully it means that we just keep doing bigger and bigger and better ones.
A small funny question, if you had a time machine and get to go back in time, in hindsight, would you do anything differently to change the outcome of the project?
If I had a time machine, there would be a lot of small things I would change, just small things. And one big thing, I would have really interrogated my data with my client sitting beside me. It would have been worth spending a great deal more time interrogating the data from that earlier chicken farm. In terms of product selection, no. I think at that time this was the best design. This system will be connected to the grid in the next 6 months. And so we're going to use this system to actually participate in the Australian energy market selling power into the high-priced spot market that we have here. So the system, if it was designed in any other way, wouldn't have enabled that future. So, yeah.
Nicely answered. On an ending note, how would you describe your overall journey in the solar industry so far? And what are your predictions for the near future?
As I said, I started because I lived off-grid. I started before solar was cool. There was 50 people in the industry when I started. Now there's about 50,000 in Australia. So you can imagine the massive growth. And in Australia, like many other parts of the world, we call this the solar coaster because it's up and down and it's a wild ride. It's a wild ride. It's got a lot of good stuff. And like I was meant to actually be this week, I was meant to be in Papua New Guinea in one of the remotest villages, installing a solar system to give people who've never had power a power system for 140 people. And it's part of the charity that we have. We have a charity we call One Sun. It's our own gift to help humanity. And I guess to see that, we can do thousands of off-grid systems, but to go and give a family, a village or a school energy where they've never had power before, that is the bit that really matters, that is in itself is just worthwhile. It doesn't change the world. It just changes the world for those people. And I think we're in an industry that's so good.
I believe it does. It changes the world one bit at a time.
Exactly. And that's sometimes all that matters, right?
And that's a wrap for this episode of Selling the Storm. Thank you so much, Huon, for sharing your great insights.
Thank you, Triumph. Thank you, ENF. And I really appreciate just taking the time to hear a little bit about my story. I'm just a small cog in this big world. And I hope that we can all make a positive difference for a better future for everyone.
This wasn't about building the biggest system. It was about building one that couldn't fail. Thank you for joining us on Selling the Storm. We will see you in the next episode.